Indonesia is considering taxing sweetened drinks, vehicles that emit carbon and plastic bags. Finance Minister Sri Mulyani Indrawati has drawn up the hit list as the government copes with weak tax collection. It's also experiencing the slowest economic growth in 3 years. The tax on beverages containing sugar or artificial sweeteners would be up to 18 cents a litre. It would cover bottled tea, coffee, carbonated soft drinks and energy drinks. Ms. Indrawati has also reintroduced her proposal to impose a levy on plastic bags. Now, it's been on the table for 3 years, but Parliament has yet to approve it. She says the levy may be small, but it could cut Indonesia's consumption of plastic bags by half. The government also wants to impose duties on new vehicles that emit carbon as part of plans to control pollution. Now, for more, we're joined by Shoaib Khagda, founder of Indonesia Economic Forum. Shoaib, thanks for joining me. First up, when do you think these taxes might be introduced, though?
Well, I think it might take some time. They have been on the table for 3 years, as you mentioned. But this is a crunch time for Indonesia in terms of revenue for the government. And one of the reasons you mentioned is slowing economic growth, but also investments, foreign direct investments have slowed significantly over the past 1 year. And the government is facing rising fiscal deficit, which will prevent President Jokowi from carrying out his infrastructure programs and some of the other big programs that he's unveiled in his second 5-year term. So the key really is for the government to raise tax revenue.
All right, you mentioned that it's a reaction to a slower economy. Is this also a reaction to weaker tax collection, though?
Well, the tax collection has slightly decreased, but I think the more important question is, the tax base is still very, very small in Indonesia. Only 12% of Indonesians pay taxes. Most of the taxes come from corporations. Individuals rarely pay tax. So one of the key issues is really for Indonesia to expand and increase its tax base if it wants to increase tax revenues.
All right, you mentioned that, Indonesians rarely pay taxes, but it's the corporations. So what does the sugar tax mean for F&B manufacturers then?
Well, that's what I've just been checking around. Many of them said that they will be hit. Of course, sweet drinks, sugar drinks, Indonesia is famous for its teh botol, which is almost like a national drink. It's a very sweet tea which comes in a bottle. The producers of these drinks and beverages will definitely be impacted. Now, the question is whether they absorb the tax or they pass it on to the consumer. But as consumption is slowing, I think companies will be very reluctant to pass on the cost to the consumer, which then, of course, would mean that they will suffer less revenue, less profits, which will then, of course, impact their ability to expand and increase investments. So we have to see how the government will play this out.
What else is interesting is that Ms. Sri Mulyani said that the sugar tax is to actually cut consumption of sweet drinks, arguing that diabetes and obesity levels have been rising. But will actually increasing taxes help lower these?
Well, I think the jury is out on that. Indonesians love their sugar. I'm not sure whether taxes, raising prices through taxation alone will decrease supply. It hasn't worked in the past. But there is also a move to becoming a healthier, and the government and in fact many organizations and individuals themselves are starting to realize that they need to have better healthier lives and to cut down on sugar consumption. But I think it's easier said than done to really reduce sugar consumption significantly in Indonesia at the moment.
All right, let's look at the other taxes then. She also wants to raise plastic bag tax. Do you think it will go well with retailers and consumers?
Well, the head of the Retail Association already said that he will fight this, and he is going to campaign in Parliament against this tax. So she's already facing some pushback immediately. Plastic bags are very commonly used in Indonesia. There has been some movement to limit the use of plastic bags. But again, it's not the plastic bags that are used in major supermarkets. It's really plastic bags that are used across the country in small towns and villages, where I think the majority of plastic is really consumed because there's really no alternative. To other types of bags that have been produced are too expensive for these consumers who I would categorize as the lower income groups. They need plastic bags to transport their products. And also, if you look at the growth of e-commerce across the country, how are they gonna deliver the goods that people buy online? And that's a major growth sector of the economy. So, there could be a double whammy here in terms of if consumers are asked to pay or pay for plastics. I think she's going to charge 200 rupiah per plastic consumed.
So the other tax that she's also considering will be vehicles that emit carbon. Do you think time is ripe for Indonesia to actually impose green vehicle taxes now?
This should have been done years ago. I mean, Indonesia has been choking in pollution, especially in public vehicles. So while she's taxing private vehicles for carbon, I think the government also has to move to try and limit or clean up public transportation vehicles, especially the older rickety buses that emit just really bad black smoke. But pollution, I think this tax, I think she will get a lot more support just because it will help to reduce pollution.
All right, so since she's going to get some of these support, how much is she expecting to raise from these taxes then?
Well, she hasn't said how much she's, I haven't seen any numbers, to be honest, as to how much the government hopes to raise taxes. But if you look at car consumption, there are, I think, about 1 million vehicles sold on Indonesian roads a year. So that's a huge number. Although they have declined a little bit in the past couple of years because of a slowing economy, you're still looking at a huge sector. So I think a carbon tax, I think she will get a lot more support.
All right, thank you for sharing your insights. We've been speaking to Shob Kagda, founder of Indonesia Economic Forum.